Top 10 fantasy books I have read since I did the last wrap-up. Now, since I did the last wrap, I have read 10 more books, or actually technically 11 more books. And as we usually do on this channel, I'll rank them from worst to best. So without further ado, let's get into it. Now, before we get to number 10, I just want to highlight that I actually DNF'd one book. The classic Something Wicked This Way Comes by Bradbury. Now, I know that people love this book, and I just think I might not have been in the right mood for it. Or it was the narrator on the audiobook that just didn't work for me. I don't know. I really enjoyed the beginning of that book, but I just could not continue. But I might get back to it one day because I know it's a favorite of so many people. And then there's also a novella on this list that I haven't included because I kind of want to reread it, and that is Beast Color by Kate and Love. Now, I read an elegy of a fragmented vineyard a couple of months ago and I quite enjoyed it, and he's recently come out with this novella and I read it and I just couldn't connect with it. I'm not sure what it was, and it's literally one of those weird reading experiences where I read the whole thing, put the book down, and 3 days later I didn't remember anything I had read. So I actually kind of want to go back and reread it and like really give it my attention, because maybe I just wasn't in the right state of mind when I picked it up. Okay, but without further ado, let's get to number 10. So the worst book I have read since the last wrap up is, and I can't believe I'm saying this because this is genuinely probably my top 3 favorite authors of all time, but that is Dragonhaven by Robin Hobb. Now, this is book 2 in the Rainwell Chronicles, or I think chronologically it's book 11 in the Realm of the Elderlings. And yeah, I know most people say that this quartet is the weakest series in the Realm of the Elderlings, but man, Dragonhaven was a slog. I quite enjoyed the first book in this series, but this book, almost nothing happens. And the whole plot here is about angsty teenagers that are incredibly horny, and that's basically what all this book is about. Teenagers on a boat, struggling with their desires, and it is just cringy and boring. Again, just to reiterate, almost nothing happens. Now, the conclusion, like the very last chapter or chapters, are quite interesting because we learn more about the Elderlings and the dragon and so on. But yeah, this book was, it took me like 2.5 weeks to get through this book. It was a real slog, and I've never experienced this with any Robin Hobb book before. So yeah, big disappointment, but I am a completionist. I love the series. I'll definitely be reading the whole Rainwell Chronicles, but yeah, it's a real shame because I'm not excited for book 3 at all. And then I read a book that hasn't actually even come out yet, which is The Way of the Wizard by Michael Michel, or Michael, I'm not sure how you pronounce that. Now, the author reached out to me a couple of weeks ago and asked if I wanted to read his novel, and when I looked at the cover, I was like, wow, that's a really cool cover. And then I saw that this book is less than 300 pages, and then it's also a standalone, or at least I think it's a standalone because it kind of reads like a standalone. And I was like, I'm actually in the mood for a palate cleanser, and every once in a while I like to give books that are underrated or don't really have many reviews a try. So I picked up this book, and overall I enjoyed it, but I really think that I am not the target customer here, because in a lot of ways this book kind of read like a YA novel, which in of itself is not anything bad, it's just not my thing. And then this is also kind of a progression fantasy. It's quite an interesting take on it, but yeah, it's a progression fantasy. And while I haven't read many progression fantasies yet, I've just come to realize that most progression fantasies I just don't find interesting. So maybe I should have done my research better before I picked up this book, because inherently, if you think about a YA progression fantasy, I think the author does a really good job here. Those two things are just not my jam. But yeah, I would still recommend it because it's still quite short, and it's definitely a very fast-paced read. Okay, on spot number 8, we have Never Die by Rob J. Hayes. This is the Broken Binding edition, and genuinely, I'll put some beef on this here. This book, and this special edition, is mind-blowingly beautiful. Now, I've been wanting to pick up a Rob J. Hayes book for ages, and it's finally happened, and I picked one of his most favorite ones, Never Die, which is a standalone, but this is kind of like a trilogy of standalones. But I talked to the author, and it sounds like you can start with any of them because apparently they are just set in the same world. Now, I actually enjoyed Never Die. Again, it's quite a nice palate cleanser, but there's just something slightly lacking to get me emotionally invested in this novel. Now, I loved our protagonist here, Im, I'm not sure how you pronounce that name. I thought he was hilarious, and I love a good motley crew, and we definitely have a good motley crew here. But again, it's not a bad thing in of itself, but it's quite rare for me to love quest fantasies. I mean, Lord of the Rings, I love Lord of the Rings, and there are definitely quest fantasy books out there, but whenever like a crew comes together and they just go on a journey and they just, you know, meet chaos on the way, and then there's conflict, and then they meet more chaos on the way, it's alright, but it's definitely not my favorite thing in the world. But this will definitely not be my last Rob J. Hayes book. So if you read quite a lot of books from him, definitely let me know where you think I should go next. Should I pick the next book in the series, or should I start with some of his other series? And then on 7th spot, we have a novella I think it's only around 40 pages by one of my all-time favorite authors now, Ken Liu. I've actually made a whole video here where I talk about loads of fantasy stories you can get for free online. And in that video, I did mention Passing of the Dragon, and this novel is beautiful. I read it in one sitting in less than an hour. I mean, Ken Liu is just a master of analyzing themes, writing characters, and just emotionally impacting you. I don't really have any massive complaints about here. The only real reason why it's not higher is because it's so short, and I've actually read a lot of great books recently. But yeah, you should definitely check out this one. It'll take you less than an hour, and it'll definitely give you some things to think about. And it's Ken Liu. I mean, you should all be reading Ken Liu. And then on 6th spot, we have Yumi and the Nightmare Painter. Now, I also made a full review here. You can watch it if you want to know my full thought on this one. But yeah, I had a great time with this one. I mean, it's not Mistborn or so on my archive, but at the moment, I would probably say that this is now my favorite Cosmere standalone. So yep, that's quite high praise. I enjoyed it more than Warbreaker or Elantris or any of the other standalones. My only real nitpick here is the ending. The final act I found to be a bit confusing, and then the very end after the conflict has been resolved, I just found it thematically not to make much sense. But again, that's just a minor nitpick. I found this very interesting. I really love that we have stories like this in the Cosmere, because this definitely shows a different side of the world that we haven't really seen before. And yeah, great characters. It was Asian inspired, and yeah, I had a wonderful time with this one. So if you haven't read any Brandon Sanderson, I know some people would be against this, but I actually think you can start with this one, and most people would have a wonderful time with it. So yeah, if you haven't picked up Yumi and the Nightmare Painter yet, I would definitely recommend it. Okay, on 5th spot, we have the first book in a series that I've been wanting to start for more than a year, maybe 2 years, and that is Empire in Black and Gold by Adam Jakosky, the first book in the Shadow of App series, which is a 10-book series. And then I also believe there's some other, like a spin-off series or sequel series as well. This series is crazy long. But yeah, I finally read Empire in Black and Gold, and this was great. I really enjoyed it. Now, if you watch my channel, then you know that I've tried like 3 or 4 other Adam Jakosky novels, only his sci-fi work really. And I have struggled with basically every single sci-fi book he's ever written that I've read, except Children of Time, which is now one of my favorite novels of all time. But yeah, I think Adam Jakosky is probably an author that is just a bit too smart for me. Like, I don't really understand most of the things he writes, because yeah, I think it's just too clever. But this is epic fantasy, and wow, this was so fascinating. It's not often you read epic fantasy that has a futuristic feel, because we have like helicopters and we have modern technology, and the world building here is inspired by insects. So okay, it's not like Children of Time where we actually have really massive intelligent spiders, but this world is split into different like kingdoms or countries, and people have special abilities that come from insects. And yeah, I still have a lot of questions about how like technology and magic works here and about all the different races, but I found the world building to be very interesting, and it was just really nice to pick up a novel where you open the pages and you just feel like this world is absolutely massive. It's something that I miss a lot with more like traditional fantasy. It's not often you see this kind of scale in modern books, and yeah, this was also published like 15 years ago. But yeah, very exciting first book, and I'm definitely going to be continuing with this one. And on 4th spot, we have a classic, I Am Legend, and yeah, I love this novel. This is quite a short novel, and I think most of you have probably heard about the adaptation with Will Smith, which is also a really good adaptation. But yeah, there's so many things I loved about this one. Firstly, it's actually quite different from the movie, which I really enjoyed, because if you don't know anything about the book, I have to tell you, I Am Legend is not about zombies. It is about clever vampires. Yes, it's not about zombies. But yeah, most people say that this is the first like official zombie novel, because yes, they are vampires, but they literally act like zombies in every single way. And there's so many things I loved about this novel. Just exploration of how we humans, we are created to have relationships with other humans, and the exploration of meaning of life, and is it worth to keep on going when you don't really see a sense of purpose. And then also just following our protagonist of how he's trying to cope with having lost everyone, and how he's trying to create a sense of meaning in this world that is just full of depravity. And yeah, I would definitely recommend I Am Legend. It's a very short novel, less than 200 pages. It's beautifully written, so many interesting themes, and if you watch the movie, they're gonna tell you right now that there's quite a lot of differences with the book, especially the final act is so different. So yeah, absolutely love this one, and I can definitely understand why it's a classic. And then on 3rd spot, we have a book I finished yesterday, which is Book 2 in Memory, Sorrow and Thorn, Stone of Farewell by Ted Williams. Now, I made a dedicated review for Dragonman Chair a couple of months ago, which is honestly now one of my favorite epic fantasy books of all time. incredible. Like Ted Williams, he could write an IKEA manual and I would read it. I know I often talk about how like Robin Hobb is a beautiful writer, but yeah, I think Ted Williams is even better in that sense. Like the way he crafts sentences is almost like reading poetry, but not quite. It's just beautifully written. And it's so interesting to read this series, because this series is one of the main inspirations for George R. Martin to write A Song of Ice and Fire. And there are so many similarities between those two series. Now, in a lot of ways, George R. Martin probably took what Ted Williams did with A Memory of Sorrow and Thorn and maybe improved upon it. Probably like cut out some of the slow bits, because yeah, Memory of Sorrow and Thorn is horrendously slow. But yeah, I'm just absolutely captivated with it. It's quite rare for me to be okay with a novel that is this slow paced. A Stone of Farewell is like 850 pages, and if I should tell you everything that happens in that novel, I could probably boil it down to like 2 or 3 big events, and all the other things are just character talking about the state of the world, what is happening, characters traveling and having internal struggles. I mean, plot-wise, very little happened. It's very much a middle book, but I loved it. I loved it because of Ted Williams' ability to write beautiful scene and craft engaging characters, and yeah, the world building is just so exciting. I love this. This is honestly, when I finish it, I would be thoroughly surprised if this doesn't become one of my favorite series of all time, because I love Robin Hobb, and Ted Williams is like Robin Hobb, just almost feels like he's better. So yeah, loving this world, loving this series, and I can't wait to read book 3, which is, I think, 520,000 words. Just to compare, I think Oathbringer is like 450,000 words. So yeah, that book, the last book in Memory of Sorrow and Thorn, is literally 50,000 words longer. So yeah, what is like 1,400, 1,500 pages? It's madness. That's gonna take me ages to get through. And then on spot number 2, we have Speaking Bones, the conclusion to the Dandelion Dynasty. I firmly expected this to be my favorite book of the past 10 books, but yeah, there's one book above here that literally blew my mind. But yeah, the Dandelion Dynasty, I made a dedicated spoiler-free review for this series if you want to know more about it. I think it is arguably the most underrated fantasy series I have ever read. It is criminal that Ken Liu is not talked about as one of the genius of the past decade when it comes to fantasy. But yeah, I could talk about the Dandelion Dynasty for ages, so please do check out this video if you want to know more. Now, you might be wondering which book is on spot number 1, and yeah, as I said, I did not expect any book to overtake Speaking Bones, but that is a book we read for the Viking book club, Hyperion by Dan Simmons. Now, if you don't know, then I read one book a month with my patrons, and the patrons are actually allowed to put books forward, and then I randomly pick a book from all the books that are being put forward. And in March we read Hyperion together, and then we also had a Zoom book club discussion. And yeah, I mean, Hyperion, it's one of the few books that you read it and then it just stays with you. It's been around 6 weeks since I read it, and it's still literally a book that I almost think about daily. I mean, I should maybe make a dedicated review for Hyperion because it just blew my mind. But yeah, if you don't know anything about Hyperion, it's basically written like a short story collection. Now, it is one story, but it's about characters on a spaceship, and they all know that they are intertwined. Like, there's a reason why they're all on there. So they go in circles and they tell their story of why they're there. And you as a reader, you have so many questions. And what just blew my mind with Hyperion is how versatile Dan Simmons is as an author. These short stories are so different from each other, but they're all incredible. Now, some are better than others, but wow, mind-blowingly good stuff, both when it comes to characterizations, when it comes to exploration of themes. And Hyperion is truly one of those books that Dan Simmons has just been able to really withhold enough information to keep you intrigued, but he also gives you enough answers that you keep on reading. Now, the only reason why I haven't instantly picked up book 2 is because Hyperion, it kind of reads like a standalone, and I'm actually really worried that when Dan Simmons starts to actually provide answers to a lot of the questions I have, it might diminish my reading experience of Hyperion. I think one of the beautiful things with that book, and it's quite weird, is the fact that he doesn't answer all the questions. When you put that book down, you just want to discuss all the things, all the theories you have about how time works, how the whole world works, how the characters are intertwined. And yeah, I'm just worried that book 2, 3, and 4 will actually really diminish my perception of book 1. But yeah, as you know, I primarily read epic fantasy, but Hyperion is without a doubt one of the best books I have ever read. And even if you're a person that doesn't really love sci-fi, you should still give it a go because it's such a character-driven novel. But yeah, I should probably make a full dedicated review for Hyperion. We'll see if that ever happens. But those are the 10 books I read recently. What did you think about my ranking? And have you read any of these? Now, as you know, I constantly keep reading more books. And if you want to know all the lessons I've learned from having read 300 fiction books, then you should definitely check out this video. Oh, you're still here and you want more? Well, the good news is that if you want more and you want to support me, then I do have a Patreon. Now, if you didn't know, then I have a Viking book club where where every single month we read one book together, and you can be the one that can put the book forward. Last month we read this book, and this month we're reading this book. And at the moment we are trialing having Zoom book club discussions after everyone has read the book. So also if you want to discuss a book with me and other like-minded people, then the Patreon is the way to go. Now, in addition to getting your name in my videos, joining the Viking book club, potentially getting art cards depending on what tier you are, I am also basically spending around 100% of my Patreon income to reinvest back into my channel. Since I launched my Patreon, I have had more than 30 videos professionally edited. And just to give an example, from September 2023 to March 2024, I have spent more than $1,500 into video editing with the aim to consistently post high quality videos for you to enjoy. It is much appreciated.